Mr. Davidson, when did you first come to the Indy 500 track?
My first visit was 1964, and I was just a visitor.
And then you joined the network the next year?
That was the next year, yes. I came back in 1965. I emigrated and stayed, and I was able to get a job with the United States Auto Club. And then Sid Collins, chief announcer for the radio network, hired me, and I've been on the broadcast ever since.
And that was my other question. You started out in England.
Yes.
That's where you were born, and you said that you were in theater in the West End for a while.
Yes.
How did you get involved in auto racing?
I just showed up, and because I had followed it deeply from afar, and just decided I've got to go and at least see this thing. And it was just a daydream that I would ever get involved. I mean, strictly a wild daydream. And so I just showed up and was immediately taken into the inner circle, and that's why I thought, boy, I've got to come back next year and pursue this, and I've just been very blessed ever since to be involved.
So you just bought a ticket, came to Indianapolis,
Yes.
and attended the race.
Absolutely, yes.
Wonderful. And you answered the question, but tell us again. I've listened to you for so many years, and of course you come with such wonderful historical background that you give to the race broadcast. Somebody asked you, would you give that answer again? What do you attribute your wonderful memory to?
Oh, yes. Well, I've been given credit for years for having a photographic memory, and I do not have a photographic memory. What I have been told I have by several people, they say what you have is selective, retentive, easy access, which means that I can memorize what I care about and cannot memorize what I don't care about.
Wonderful.
Our special guest today is the Indy 500 historian, Mr. Donald Davidson. He has been the official Indianapolis Motor Speedway's historian since January of 1998. He is believed to be the only full-time salaried historian for any racetrack in the world, perhaps best known for being a member of the Speedway's worldwide radio network continuously since 1965. The British-born raceteer has also hosted since 1971 the Talk of Gasoline Alley on WFNI Indianapolis. He was introduced into the Auto Racing Hall of Fame in 2010 and the Richard N. Fairbanks Indiana Broadcast Pioneers Hall of Fame in 2013. Please give your attention to Mr. Donald Davidson.
Well, good afternoon, everybody, and great to be back in Brazil. I've been through here many times, and I've spoken here, but it's been a while. And so in the time we have here, I'm kind of going to gallop a little bit. As I think probably everybody in the room is aware, we're coming up on the 100th running of the Indianapolis 500. And we've been traveling around the state with Mayor Harmless, the former mayor of Greencastle, has been my chauffeur. He's driven every inch through, golly, I think we've been to probably 50 plus counties. I know that I've done 62 appearances on this program alone, and many of them he was the chauffeur. He won't let me drive. I'm the navigator, and I've been fired 3 times. But anyway, we've had a lot of fun doing these. And yesterday, we did 5 appearances, each in a different county, and we ended up in Rushville. But rather than go into all of that, we normally will talk to the groups depending on how far north or how far south we are, a little more detail than we do when we're in central Indiana, because you either already know or you don't care. So, with that in mind, it is very unique in that we believe that it'll be the first time that an automobile race has ever been held 100 times. And I could go into that a little bit more, but that term, the 100th running or the 100th, has been rolled off our tongues so easily. I just started thinking a couple of months ago about, wait a minute, how many other races have been held 100 the answer is none. And then, of course, the Indianapolis Motor Speedway is totally unique because it opened in 1909, so it's 107 years old. It's the one only original Indianapolis Motor Speedway. I'm British by birth and born and raised in a town called Salisbury in the south of England, very close to Stonehenge. I went to school, my grammar school was on the grounds of Salisbury Cathedral. Salisbury Cathedral was built in 1220, and that's the new one to replace the one that was there before that on Melville Hill. And then I come over here, and I get interested in baseball. In 1970, the Reds have a brand new stadium, Riverfront Stadium. How's that doing today? They demolished it and built another one. And so anyway, Indianapolis Motor Speedway is the original, and they keep adding to it and adding to it. And it's had numerous surfaces, many of which are still there today, and there's a reason for bringing that up. I tell people, if you go to the track today and get the two of us and take the ride around the track, you're doing the same 2.5 miles that Ray LaRue did in 1911, except you're about 3 feet further above sea level than he was. But anyway, the tie-in is the second surface. The original was crushed rock and tar. That's what they opened with in 1909, and that proved to be a disaster. I think maybe they didn't let it sit long enough. I mean, they started racing on it immediately, and so it got all torn up. Anyway, that's a long story, but the short version is that in the fall of 1909, they bought in from the western part of the state 3,200,000 street paving bricks that weighed about 9.5 pounds apiece. The deal was made with the Wabash Clay Company in Petersburg. And because it was going to require so many bricks, I mean, they originally built a 3.5 bill. It ended up being 3,200,000. But while the greater number of them came from Wabash Clay Company and are called Culver blocks, they couldn't fill the entire order because it was so massive. And so what they did was to make deals, they being Wabash Clay, they made deals with some of the surrounding towns and said, can you help us out to help fill this order? And so there were, I think there were 5 different companies that they worked with that supplied 16 different types have been identified. But one of the companies that they went to was in Brazil. And there are a few Brazil pavers in the Indianapolis Speedway to this day, because in many cases, other than when a tunnel went in, the bricks are still there. So anyway, there is a Brazil tie-in that continues on to this day. And a couple of other notes. Normally I do a Q&A, but I think what we're going to have to do here is to hurry the program along a little bit. I've got a couple of other Brazil stories that I wanted to tell you that tie in a little bit. You'll have to decide on that. And normally I would open it up for Q&A, but I think probably my stories will take you up through, if some of you are familiar with what we do, and I'll go off on another little tangent here. I've spent all this time with Mayor Harmless, and he's a huge race fan, a long time ticket buyer, and been going since he was a kid. And he had a lot of stories, a lot of questions, and as well as stories that he's sharing, a lot of questions. And some of them are getting more in depth. And so on one of our trips, we were going to Kokomo, and we were just setting up, picking out, and we're up around Carmel. We're just on 31 and heading up Carmel. And he said, I've always wanted to know, and then I won't go into what the question was, but I mean, it was a heavy-duty question that involved a lot of political, behind-the-scenes stuff, and some of which I had knowledge of. That's terrible grammar. But anyway, so I said, well, I can answer the question, but it's going to take a while. You want to hear the whole thing? He said, yes. And so I told the whole story, we went off on all the tangents, and we were pulling into Kokomo when I was winding up. So we got from Carmel to Kokomo on one question. That's a true story. Anyway, a couple of Brazil things. And that is that in 1967, I'm kind of dating myself, in 1967, a young lad working for the United States Auto Club in Speedway, and there was a USAC stock car race over at Wentzville, Missouri, which is a road course out in the Tules on the far side of St. Louis. And Wentzville is where Chuck Berry lives, and that has nothing to do with what we're talking about. So that ain't any opportunity I'll get yet. So anyway, I had gone over early and ridden with somebody. I think I went over like on Wednesday because there was going to be a press conference to talk about the event. But the event wasn't until the weekend. And so the person that took me over there left and came back. And so did, Cornelly Jones was at the press conference, and Don White, a bunch of other stock guys. They all went back and said, see you 3 or 4 days. So I was in St. Louis for several days with Linda Vaughn and another guy. But anyway, so we went to all the TV stations, and then so getting to the point of the story, I just wanted to show off and let you know that I know Linda Vaughn. But anyway, so comes the race, and it was a stock car race, this little road course, but they had aspirations of having a United States Auto Club, what I still call a national championship race. And so George Bignotti, they made a deal with George Bignotti to take over a Lola that Al Unser had driven. Now, it was painted up like Al Unser's second place finish in the then most recent 567. Al hadn't won yet, but the car that he finished second to point with, this was a backup car painted in the same livery. And so what they were going to do, shortly before the start of the stock car race, Al would do like 3-4 demonstration laps with this rear engine Ford. So anyway, they did that, and then Al drove in the stock car race. And in the meantime, I needed to ride home, and so I booked up with George Bignotti and a fellow named Jimmy Gillenmarter, who's still with the Cornelly Jones organization to this day. And so he drove the station wagon, towing a double axle trailer with the loader in the back. And so off the two of us went, me riding shotgun, just the two of us. And so we left the St. Louis area, and we're driving and driving and driving, and it's 9 o'clock and 10 o'clock, 11 o'clock and 12 o'clock, and the stories are getting better and better. And we're just BSing and telling war stories. So anyway, we're kind of getting closer to home. We've crossed the state line, and we're in Indiana, and the freeway isn't done yet. So we're on 40. So we're going at a considerable rate of speed, and he's telling some story, and then all of a sudden, oh no! We're heading into Brazil, and he hadn't paid attention, and there's a turn, isn't there? The road bears to the right, doesn't it? And so anyway, he must have been running 80 miles an hour, and he jammed on the brakes. I remember just, feeling the impact. Well, when you've got a trailer with a race car behind you, it don't slow down as quick as you would hope it would. And so anyway, we come to the corner where the Blue Bonnet restaurant is, which was the famous stop where all the sprint car people would always stop on the way home. Off on another little tangent, and how are we doing here? I'm going to talk faster. All right, but coming back to the Terre Haute sprint races, you see all the trailers and see the sprint cars out in the parking lot. It was a great place to eat. So anyway, I didn't have time to look at that because I'm fearing for my life here. I cannot tell you to this day whether the light was red or green. All I knew, I looked over at Jimmy, and he was very busy. And the arms were lashing, trying to get the thing slowed down. We made the turn, doing a four-wheel drift, and then he managed to straighten it out on two things. Coming in the opposite direction was a tanker and a semi, and I looked out over to see if Jimmy was doing okay, and the trailer was completely sideways. It was doing about 60, but bouncing along, and so I got a real good look at the trailer that was holding Al Unser's Rexlaw Chemical Special #5. And fortunately, Jimmy stayed on the gas. He got back on the gas, and it pulled it forward, and then managed to straighten the trailer. And I don't know how close the tanker was to hitting the trailer, but we slowed down thereafter, and so it was pretty interesting for a few moments. And anyway, we made it back safely to Indianapolis, and to this day, well, George McDuffie passed away a couple of years ago, but I don't think he ever knew how close we came to losing a very expensive racing car in an accident that surely would have made the news. Anyway, that's one Brazil story, and then the other one actually ties in with Alan Sir. And then I'll have to wrap up, and then we'll see if I can. No, we may not have any time for Q&A, but I've got another thing to talk to you about. But before I get there, the other Brazil story that I wouldn't normally get to tell very often, and not too long ago wouldn't even have known about, and it involves Al Unser. Now, Al, as you know, is from Albuquerque, New Mexico, and the family, the grandparents were German immigrants, and some of them, they ended up in Albuquerque and Colorado Springs just before that, Colorado Springs, Colorado. But it took a little time to get there. And several years ago, Al Unser decided to start a museum, which he now has. It's in Albuquerque. It was going to be down next to his house. And anyway, I don't know. I'll have to hurry the story up here because I've got several things I wanted to throw in, but I'll have to toss them as we go here. So to get to the point of the story, in setting up the museum and getting all of the family information together and having the wife do a little bit of genealogy, they found out that the grandparents for a while had lived in a place called Afton, Illinois, which is very close to St. Louis. And so they'd arrived in New York and in over a period of several years worked their way across country. So in more of setting up the museum, I went out several times and even stayed at Al Unser's house, and I didn't have to throw that in except I just wanted to gloat this a little bit. Anyway, so they come out on one of the visits and said, "You'll never guess what we found out. We've dug in more to the family genealogy and everything, and you'll never guess this. As the grandparents were moving across country, they lived for a while in Brazil, Indiana." I'll bet you didn't know that off of Wikipedia. And I said, no. And I mean, I don't know if this was like late 1890s or 1900s or something. I said, "You're kidding." And they said, "Yeah, look, here's some documentation that they actually lived in Brazil." And I said, "Well, before 70 was in, and when you were, spending the summers in Indianapolis and racing at Terre Haute and going back and forth through Brazil, you never imagined that your grandparents had lived there." He said, "Not a clue." So anyway, I think that's about all the time we have for. No, I got about 2 minutes here, and I think we're going to do several things. We're going to do a drawing. I think the bell chimes at 1 o'clock, and I'm hard to slow down. So, but I've got it timed down here. I've got one more thing, and then later on, after we're done with this, on a more informal basis, I'll be happy to stick around and do some Q&A. But boy, this is a great audience. I wish that we could have had you at some of the other events that we've done where we had more time, because I see a lot of smiling faces and nodding heads out there. Anyway, this is going to sound like a joke, and I'm perfectly serious. I'm sure that many of you are familiar with the term yellow shirt. Those are the well-meaning people who, they're not police, but they're sort of like customer service people at the track. And they blow the whistles to make sure that a race car doesn't knock you down coming through Gasoline Alley. And so there's several hundred of those that merry band that come back every year to be involved. Well, this year, because clearly it's going to be a much larger group than we normally have, a crowd, I should say, on race day especially, is going to be way up. In fact, it's effectively a sellout already. In fact, I don't even know why the hell we're doing this. We're trying to we're out of pocket. What are we don't. Come, but sorry, they can't accommodate you after that. So anyway, because they have a much larger crowd and a non-qualification practice, they need more yellow shirts than they have. And if you have any interest, if you could devote the whole month or just a few days, husbands and wives, any neighbors, anybody that you know, Mayor Holmes has the application that pays $8 an hour. And if seriously, and if there's a student in your life, they have what they call the blue shirts, and they use the college kids sort of will like man the pagoda and to make sure that the dignitaries are getting in and out. But if you have any interest at all in being a yellow shirt, seriously, Mayor Congress will take care of you. It is 1 o'clock and 5 seconds, and I got it done.